Hello, welcome to another episode of Loremaker's Guide to the Galaxy. My name's Adam Wieser, and I am an associate writer here at CIG Los Angeles, and I'll be your host today on a tour of one of the many systems that you'll be able to explore in Star Citizen and potentially Squadron 42. So today we're going to go off to a system which is interesting for a number of reasons. It's in kind of an interesting position, it has an interesting history, and for the longest time, no one really thought much about it, which actually played into how important it did become within the history of the UEE in particular. So today we're going to go visit the system of Tohil. We're going to start on Earth, as always, and here using this handy, beautiful star map that we've put together along with our friends at Turbulent. We're going to hit Tohil right here in the search bar. And let's go visit the system. Now, the system was originally discovered in 2716, and though it was discovered at that time, the UEE didn't claim it for a while after, for reasons which I'll explain as we go further into this presentation. But it's a 4-planet system that has at the very center a K4 main sequence star. Now this thing, I love going in close here because the effects they have of the sun rays coming off it are quite beautiful. These types of stars are really something that astronomers really look out for in the universe even today, because they have a long, stable time where they can actually basically put out the right amount of heat and everything to have a very good and viable green band. These things can stay stable for close to 15 to 30 billion years is kind of the range we expect, which is about double what the sun at the center of our system is expected to kind of like stay in its state. So people always look to these types of systems with the K4 main sequence stars as being quite potential for maybe alien life forms and habitation, which was the case when this system was first discovered too. They do, just for a frame of reference, they do have, they're not as big or as bright as the sun at the center of the Sol system. This one, for example, this star at the center of Tohil, actually has a luminosity of 0.19 compared to our sun. If our sun's 1, this is just almost 2/10 as bright when it comes to that. Now the Tohil system itself, let's back out here for a second and try to explain why this system hasn't really been thought highly of or much about throughout most of history. Was discovered by two basically almost by chance, by Oisha Sun and Aida Famino, who were basically two folks that were running this smuggling operation right here in the Nix system, which you'll see is connected to Tohil through a large jump point. So they were living on Levski, which, as you're familiar with, they have basically people there that are anti-UEE, and when this system was discovered in 2716, it was the height of kind of the Mesa rain. Lots of really horrible stuff was going on, and people were realizing that they weren't quite what they hoped to be. So they were working in Nix, a system which was anti-UEE, but they also don't want to encourage a lot of piracy or a lot of bad stuff going on there, because more activity by those types of elements might then bring the UEE to go visit them and kind of stamp the foot down. So they actually were banished from Levski for Aida Firmino actually trying to really promote their smuggling operation. They were kicked out, and they're sitting in the outer reaches of the Nix system here, just floating around. And Oisha Sun was a very talented mechanic and pilot, and she was doing some fixes and repairs to the new scanner system and started to get this string of strange readings, which at first she assumed were mistakes on her part due to what she did, but after she examined it, she actually realized that they were hinting at a new jump point, and they followed it on through, and they ended up in the Tohil system. Now, if you think about this, if you look at the map right now, there's only one jump. So at the time the system was discovered, it basically ended right there. The second large jump, that didn't exist yet. Nobody knew about it. So when it first happened, they they ran back to the Nix system, Aida and Oisha, and they basically decided to figure out, like, well, what are we going to do with this? Here's this entire new system that we know very little about. But they, could we use this? Could it be a good smuggling port? They had all these ideas, and what Aida decided to do was she's like, listen, I've got some friends down here in the Bremen system. They've got some really high-class scanning equipment. Let's go pay them a visit. We'll bring them back here. They'll scan the system, and we'll figure out whether this is something maybe we should try to keep secret on our own, or whether it'll just be worthwhile to broadcast it to everyone and let them know that this new system was discovered. Now, they get to Bremen, and these two celebrate their discovery the first night. And Oisha wakes up the next morning with this terrible hangover, and Aida's gone, and so is the constellation that was used to discover the system. And not long thereafter, news reports start popping up all over the UEE that this new explorer, Aida Firmino, had discovered a brand new system. Now, Oisha was really hurt by this because she was the one who did a lot of the work to do this, and she also felt double-crossed by Aida, and basically went to the Terra Gazette with her side of the story, and with a bunch of reg tags showing the constellation that they'd used and a bunch of smuggling operations. And in doing this, kind of blew up Aida's entire story about how she was this lone, intrepid explorer that had gone off and discovered this new system. The entire controversy was was kind of big news on the spectrum for a few weeks until it eventually kind of faded away. Now, once the UE got word about the system, they went in there, and again, if you're looking at the map, it's just Nix to there. That's all they see, and even at that time, Nix wasn't a UEE system, but the UEE still went in because they wanted to see exactly what was there. And besides the sun, which we described before, they found Tohil 1, which is a lava planet, as you can see, very, very close to the system's sun. Now, just to give you an idea of how close, this is 0.064 AU away from the sun. So if the Earth is obviously 1 AU away from our sun, this is 0.064 away from this sun. So obviously all the heat and being right in that vicinity there has turned this into a lava planet and a place that's completely inhospitable for human activity in any way, shape, or form. Now, if we back up here, you can see the very start of the green band here. And next we're going to go to Tohil 2, and this is actually just on the inside edge of the green band. So this sits at 0.317 AU in the system. Again, that's measured from the sun, and the green band starts at 0.41. So just outside of it, just out in this range here. So again, it's not quite a habitable planet because it is just on the inner part of the green band. This planet it's a rocky, it's a mesoplanet, so there was a chance if it was in the green band we could make it habitable. It lacks an atmosphere though. No one quite is sure if it had it, if it lost it. The planet does suffer from very intense solar winds, so there's a theory that over the millennia, whatever atmosphere this planet had was slowly stripped away by the solar winds and just left it without an atmosphere. That fact, again, corresponding with the fact that it's just inside the green band, made this another planet that the UEE, when they first looked at it, didn't make them too excited about. Now, the crown jewel of the system, which even at that time wasn't considered that great, is Tohil 3 right here. And this is an ocean planet with no significant land masses at all on its surface. So we're going to skip over this for right now because it does play an important part in the history. But when the UE first looked at it in 2716, they just saw a big ocean world without many resources on it, and they didn't see the appeal of trying to settle down in an ocean world at that point. If we go out a little further, I'm going to back it up, and you'll see on the edge of the green band here, you've got the Tohil Belt Alpha. Now this is a very, very dense asteroid belt, and the first scans of it were kind of promising because there are minerals and different things worth mining in this belt. Unfortunately, a lot of the bigger kind of like mining conglomerates looked at the layout and what was in this asteroid belt, ran a bunch of projections, and basically discovered that for massive operations, the amount of stuff you would extract from it isn't worth all the money and the effort you would have to put in to get it out. So they've kind of left it alone. That means it's probably a good opportunity for some smaller miners to go in there and try to make a few bucks here and there. But that comes with its own dangers, which I will explain a little bit later on. Let's move on out to the last planet in the system. This is Tohil 4, and this is a super Earth. It's massive. It's frozen though. It's well beyond the frost line. It suffers a lot from asteroid strikes, so there really hasn't been much activity or much use for humanity to go to this planet. It just kind of sits out here on the very edges of the system. Now, so this is what the UEE saw when they first came and scanned it, and they saw this and they're like, you know what? We don't really need this system. It doesn't really do anything for us. It doesn't add anything to the Empire. And again, the only way to get to it would go through this unclaimed system of Nix. So what's the use in doing that? Well, it turns out that a few years later, this jump point, connecting it to Oya, was discovered. Now, at the time that this jump point was discovered coming in from Oya, this was, I believe, let me double check my notes here, 2721. So it's like 5 years after the initial discovery. Oya also was already part of what was called the Perry Line. Now, for those unfamiliar, the Perry Line was basically a string of systems that separated the UEE from the Xi'an Empire during the Cold War, particularly during the time of the Messers. These systems, like Oya, were basically completely abandoned on both sides. They'd run their military patrols through them just to keep an eye on it, but they were considered no man's land. These were buffer systems that were meant to try to keep the Empire separate. When Oya and Tohil were suddenly connected, that became suddenly maybe a more strategic place for the UEE to own. So they moved on in, and in 2721, that is when they officially claimed the system, because they figured they could stage other military units in Tohil. So if anything ever went down in Oya here, they could send in the military from Tohil, and Castra, also right down here, had a large military contingent. So they figured this would be a great, now that it's connected to Oya, it's become strategically important. They claimed the system, and they kind of went in and were spending time there. And while they were there, over the course of the years, they were doing more scanning, and that's when the second large jump point, which connects it to Virtus, up here, was discovered. Now, Virtus is a Xi'an system. It would basically become part of the Perry Line too. So the Perry Line up in this part of the map would kind of go right through here, all three of these systems. But the second that Tohil got connected to Virtus, it was no longer this kind of insulated system that was like Nix and Oya that the UEE could completely control. Now the Xi'an also had a direct route right into the Tohil system. And this kind of changed the equation and the math on whether or not it was going to be worth to keep the system, or how much it was going to be worth for the UEE to spend time in the system. Because if you kept a military contingent there, it would be very expensive to basically watch this jump point, kind of be prepared for anything that might come from Oya. And of course, if something does go on there, you're kind of isolated, because Oya is an empty system. Nix is a system which is, there's no military presence in it for the UEE. So getting any backup or resources to the system in case of an attack or an emergency or anything would be much more difficult than expected, or than you would want it to be. So because of this discovery to the Virtus system, the UEE military presence in Tohil, they decided to pull it back. And they pulled it back to Castra here. They moved it back all the way here, and basically left Tohil alone. They added it to the Perry Line, said this is basically another one of the buffer systems people can come and go through, just in case, to kind of keep our peace. Now, by the time this happened, Tohil had been known in Nix for a while, And when the military moved out, they realized, wait a minute, now we have this system here, which used to just be connected here, which also leads us into Xi'an space. So a lot of entrepreneurs and smugglers and different criminal elements realized if you didn't like the messers, if you wanted to get out of the UEE, Tohil was now a viable option, and it was one the military really wasn't spending that much time or attention on. So it was during this period that Tohil got the reputation it still has today as basically a smuggler's paradise. It's a place that not many people thought of. They didn't think, as I explained before, there's nothing really in this system. So, and that's the way that the pirates and the smugglers kept it for years and years and years, because they didn't want people coming there, because they wanted to use this as kind of the main smuggling route between the UEE and the Xi'an Empire through the end of the Cold War. Now, what these smugglers realized when we go back to Tohil 3, which is this ocean world I told you about earlier, is that Tohil 3 has, it doesn't have any land masses to populate, but it has a very interesting ecology. It has these, what they call living islands. There are these large biomasses that are part of the ocean and kind of connected, have these deep roots underground. And nobody knows exactly when or who did it, but at some point, supposedly a smuggler had to crash land on this planet, and just because they had no other choice, they set down their ship on one of these large floating formations, plant masses, and it held. And they realized over the time that these actually were sturdy and strong enough, whatever these plants were, that they could support humans walking around, landing ships, even starting to build some structures on them. So for years and years and years, they wanted to put forward this myth that nothing was there, so that every one of these smugglers and pilots could have their own little floating island that they could maybe deck out, think like Parts of the Caribbean style, like this is their own secret little place where they can go and hide their ship and build something, place to hang out and hide their loot and stuff like that. So it was a boon for the smugglers at the time, that people didn't think there was really much going on here on Tohil 3. Now, the popularity for it as a smuggling destination actually then came in to be a big part of UEE history, because in 2789, a young Emperor Kray, who was the ruler of the Xi'an Empire, actually came to this system to meet with a senator from Terra by the name of Terence Akerai. Now, they sat down and they had the first kind of human and Xi'an meeting to talk about the Cold War and try to negotiate a solution to it. And what they walked away from at the end of this conference, which was done in complete secret, nobody else in the UEE or the Xi'an Empire knew about it, is they walked away with an agreement that if the Messer government and basically the Earth part of the UEE at any point did an attack on the Xi'an Empire, Terra and the more what you would call maybe forward-thinking wing of the UEE, as represented by Terra, would support the Xi'an and would not fight in any attack against them that the Messers tried to put forward at this time. When this treaty was basically announced to the general public, it was one of those things that it didn't have an immediate impact, but it was definitely one of the key factors into the downfall of the Messers, because it showed just how toothless they were in being able to stop something like that. And it really galvanized those who were anti-Messer and probably more of a pro-Terra bent, that there was hope that there could be a peace to this Cold War. So it's a very important system in the history of the UEE for bringing peace and a bit of stability to the empire with this agreement with the Xi'an. Just a few other really quick things about Tohil 3, because this is the system, or this is the planet. When you visit the system, you'll be able to go visit some of the landing zones, see some of their. It's just even though the system isn't or this planet isn't technically recognized by the UEE Senate, there are still some UEE laws that do govern the type of building that does go on here, because the floating biomasses that take up this planet, they don't want to put too many people, too many ships, or too many large structures on them that may have an adverse effect on them. Very famously, Amadon Island sank here, and it was the biggest and the most populous island, island mass on this planet, and it sank for people. Most people believe it's because of what humanity did, putting so many structures on it, that it eventually just brought it, kind of all the weight brought it down and destroyed whatever structure, however the biomass works here. So it's an interesting place. It's not going to be too heavily populated all over the place because of the strange living conditions, but it's definitely a very unique and unusual place in the history of the system. And one final thing to note, as I said, the Tohil Belt Alpha, there are some minerals in there, and you could probably make a few bucks if you're a smaller miner wanting to go out there and do some digging around. But just be warned that, again, this system became a smuggler's paradise. There is a very strong outlaw presence in this system, and this dense asteroid belt is also one of those areas where pirates, outlaws will hang out, set up traps, maybe try to hide their whatever they have in certain places here. So even though mining might be profitable for some, it can also be quite dangerous. So just a little heads up if you decide to venture into the Tohil asteroid belt. So that was a quick look at the Tohil system, which you'll be seeing in the game at some point in the future. Hope you enjoyed the history and a little bit of the science behind it. And we'll see you next time on Loremaker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.